If you didn't listen to last week, we did the whole trip to Eden. I posted it. I was a little late posting it just because of the schedule. I'll be late posting this week's as well, because of just how my schedule looks right now. But it should be up Wednesday afternoon. But if you haven't heard it, it was Ian Clayton leads us to In the Spirit to Eden, and I wanted to start there. Just it's been a week, and I'm very curious if anybody's got any questions, comments, anything they want to share, anything they've experienced between now and then. There was definitely an aspect of that which was about to opening up a conversation into angels and saints and stuff like that. So before we move on, I thought we'd park there for a little bit if anybody wanted to share anything or have any questions on all that. Did anybody go back? Go ahead, Christina.
I don't know who was here, so I don't know who was going to say something or not, but I had started listening to the audio, and something that you said was something that I was going to say before too, about the whole, when you're going into your imagination, it's something in it surprising you, which lets you know that it's real or whatever, basically. And I have experienced that before with an activation with, I think it was Jonathan Wilton. And so I would confirm that, and it's a really cool, weird thing. And then the other thing that I was going to say was how you said something about the interpretation or the actual word of renewing your mind, of renewing your imagination, actually being the correct interpretation or whatever translation. That's a really cool and helpful tidbit.
Right. Cool. Yeah, that people don't realize how dumbed down the word imagination has become, and how ancient people's understood that that's where all creativity came from. Like your creative capacity comes from that spot. So they didn't view it as vain and ignorant and childlike. They viewed it as a significantly more sacred part of your mind. So the power of the imagination and the renewing of it, by all means, is where I would say would well, as I described last week, is the gateway between your soul and your spirit. Which another way to say that is, it is the magical part of the human mind that makes us divinity. It is divine imagination. So if you actually do a word study in the Old Testament, you'll find, I don't want to, it's either nefesh or neshama. I want to say it's nefesh, which is intellect. But it wasn't just brain smarts, so when humans have an intellect that's a divine intellect, besides just knowing math and stuff. So it's an interesting word study if you study the mind and you study thought and you study the different ways they understood those mechanisms. It's way more than just like love, just like so many other subjects. I heard the numbers one time that there's like, the numbers could be so far off, but the gauge is about right. Like there's like 9,800 like English words in modern English, and there was like 66,000 Greek words. So something that scale, if the numbers are off, don't burn me at the stake. But something to that scale of the ability for us to say things like, actually, there's something tonight. There's a word I'm gonna work over tonight, and I was taking notes. And I'm like, well, it falls so short of what's possible. But in the Greek, they had all the different words. If you want to use the word feeling, they had 8 different words for feeling. They had 5 different words for love. They had, and we've got this one word. So imagination in its true sense is very, very powerful. Anyone else? Did anybody go back to heaven or anything like that in the last week? Julie, how often do you go? How often do you do that?
Well, I'm in the middle of a resurgence because I just think it's really interesting how so many of these authors like Troward and Waddles and Neville, whatever his name is, and Gordon Neville or something, Neville Gordon. Anyway, all these
Neville
Goddard, thank you. They all talk about this subject of how important it is, even Napoleon Hill, how important it is to imagine and to put yourself, you create your own reality and it actually draws to you because of the quantum world. Now we know it's quantum. They just knew it was, I don't know, they just knew it happened. And so I've been really working on that again and going back into imagination, and I'm finding it interesting now. It was totally heavenly. It's always been total heavenly imagination. I mean, I could draw a map of the geography of where I go in heavenlies and chronicle my experiences and so forth. But now I'm understanding that it has to manifest here on earth as it is in heaven. It has to manifest. And so, and when I go into my imagination now, well, first of all, I was taught years ago, you ascend into the heavenlies, well, no, now I just turn. It's just like, where's my attention? And I go, and so I figure, so if I can just turn, it's here. It's just right here. God, we know, is in us. I mean, really know it now from your teaching. And so I'm expecting things to manifest. It has to come to expect, be it unto you as you believe. As a man believes in his heart, so is he. As thinks in his heart, so is he. So it's like, I've come to the stage that I am expecting to see manifestations. And I mean, I can't say I have yet, but I will. Because it's not only taught in the quantum world with, Dr. Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza and all those people, but it's taught in scripture. And it's just, so I'm excited, but I say I try to go every day with some real depth.
So you say, well, first of all, I thank you for differentiating the difference between ascending and turning. Right?
Yeah.
Because the whole ascension language implies over there, right? Go visit the God that is separate from you in a place that is separate from you and have an experience that is outside of you, as opposed to turn into the place that is inside of you, have an experience that is inside of you, and speak to the God that is inside of you. So the language is absolutely, because imagine how subtle that is.
It's very subtle.
Together, you don't even have to teach that it's over there. You immediately, inside your language, everyone is going somewhere else. And it is just so easy to just swallow that and not even ask the questions. So thank you for sharing that. Now I would ask, you said you haven't seen manifestation yet. Understanding the law of the creative reality. You do know, and I know you know this, that your life is a perfect manifestation. And so I would encourage, so one of the things that happens in spiritual conversation, not just Christian world, I've heard it in New Age, I've heard it in the Psyche community, everything like that, is we've defined what manifested actually means, right? That's the point. We're trying to be intentional creators, not accidental creators. So there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying manifestation equals XYZ. But on your way to being able to do it in that fashion, realizing that your life is always manifesting those realities.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to, because what happens is we give ourselves this gap that says, well, I'm not manifesting yet, so someday I will be. And so now this whole manifestation skill becomes like, someday I'll be able to walk on water. And you're like, well, it's like either 0 or 1,000 miles an hour. There's nothing in between. Well, I don't know. I guess not. I'm not manifesting yet. Well, let's repaint how your life really works. You're manifesting every day. Your life is a perfect manifestation of your beliefs. So if you want to actually improve your skill for manifesting, start looking at your real life and then dissect, in what ways have I created it? And you'll find how subtle the muscles are. Right? We want these really big, like every time I step up to bat, I hit a grand slam that wins the World Series, because then I'll really know that I'm a good baseball player. Well, there's 138 games or something like that before the World Series. I mean, there's so many things going on that if you can find the muscles that you're using every day, because you're using muscles every single day that are working and are manifesting, and if you can figure out what those are, one, you'll find they're very, very subtle, and two, you'll actually have a key to go, now what if I apply these muscles to the intentionality that I've had in my mind, this intentional definition of manifesting. And I believe you can start to go, okay, I want to get to 1,000 miles an hour, but now I know how to go 60. And now I know how to go 120. Now I know how to go 240. And you work your way towards being Jesus. You work your way towards being, I believe it, therefore it is. But that's one of a trick for my own life, where I looked at all these things that weren't manifesting. But if I really truly believe that my life is a perfect reflection of my beliefs, then it's perfectly logical to go, well, what am I manifesting? Because I'm manifesting life. So how am I intentionally causing the life I'm living? So anyway, that's just some.
Oh, this one I unmute. He does the garbage chute. This what you're saying reminded me of a video that I curated for theepic.org. And it's called Why Physicists Do Not Get Fat, something like that. And the basic premise that he was, I think his name was Greg Coombs, the basic premise that he was laying out was that rather than trying to muster all this belief for this huge thing, think what is the thing that I can believe for right now, and basically what's the better belief that I can focus on. So I don't remember the examples that he gave, but basically, rather than maybe you can't quite believe right now that you can lose weight overnight or something like that, but can you believe that you can lose 10 pounds in a month, or I don't know, whatever, and believe that you are someone who maybe it's hard to believe that you can enjoy exercise. Maybe you find an exercise that you enjoy, and that's something that you believe that, or that you can believe can help you lose weight or whatever. Basically just incrementally upping your beliefs, and you show yourself over time the good result of those beliefs, and then you can believe bigger and bigger, basically, is kind of what he was saying. And I don't know what you said, just reminded me of that, of basically just what's the best thing that you can believe right now, believe better slowly.
Well, in the law of growth, which that's how I would define it, as the universal law of growth, that is not, so we because of the Holy Spirit um, capabilities, right? Christians especially have kind of bought into this idea that if it's spiritual, it also must be magical, right? I need to be sick one day. I need to have cancer today and not have cancer tomorrow. I need to have epilepsy today and not have epilepsy tomorrow. I keep saying epilepsy. I don't know why I keep saying that, because I know that's not how it's said, but you get the point. Um, uh, I need to be poor today and not be poor tomorrow, right? And if that happens, then it was spiritual. The problem with that is that it's kind of true, because it would certainly be spiritual. So yeah, absolutely. I have actually been on the healing side of it. I've been where it's miracle, boom, magical, whatever words you want to use. But the problem then becomes that the rest of the world lives under the law of growth and works with the law of growth, and they're not expecting miracles and magic. They're expecting hard work, good decision making, you know, maybe a quote unquote lucky break here and there, but they're going to create a new life. They're going to lose weight because they changed their diet. They're going to overcome epilepsy, epilepsy because they changed their diet, which is one of the, you guys know, well, I'll leave their name out of it in case they don't want it known, but I have a good friend who, you know, had an epileptic seizure a year and a half ago, and has started to understand these things of the reality of the creative process in the individual, the envisioning and all that stuff, and went and got a brain scan a couple months ago that showed it was still abnormal. And they were really, really let down. And I said, you know, you have mistaken the spiritual possibility for the Holy Spirit to, you know, magically make you better for the creative process that you can actually work with. And for those who don't know, my wife and I are doing the ketogenic diet, which if you do any studies on it, or if you've watched The Magic Pill, you'll see that the ketogenic diet is like amazingly beneficial to those who have epileptic seizures, right? So I told this person, I said, dude, you should watch The Magic Pill. And I said, by the way, the very fact that I'm telling you about this, why don't you try viewing that as your manifestation of how to overcome epilepsy, right? So it's the same thing I was telling, you know, that what we're saying, like, you're manifesting these things all the time, but we've defined them in such a way, especially Christians, where it's got to be like this big wow. Meanwhile, I fully believe that give this person 6-8 months on this diet, they go back for a brain scan, it'll be normal. Because that's how that's one of, and so is losing weight overnight any more creative than losing weight over a 6-month period? No, I don't believe it's any more creative. It's certainly a different type of creative. And I walk that balance to say, because I know a lot of people would say, well, but we should be able to manifest things overnight. I do agree with that in the sense that that is a possibility, and that is part of our birthright. But I do not agree that the ultimate end of humanity is to be above and beyond the law of growth. I believe even inside of our divinity, even inside of our perfection and our ability to manifest God, I still believe that we will have a significant measure of working with the law of growth as opposed to superseding it. And the law of growth is 100% because we live inside of time. And it's actually a beautiful thing, I don't see it as this horrendous thing that must be overcome. You know, how do you overcome time? Well, you have to be outside of it. If you're inside of it, then you learn how to work with it. And now, if I can work perfectly in concert with it, that's a different way of having overcome it. It doesn't rule over me. I don't know if anybody's got some additional thoughts on that. I saw Christina's face kind of twist a bit when I said at least one thing, but
Yeah. I forget what it was that you said though. Do you remember what it was?
when I said that I don't believe that our ultimate end is to
Oh, that you think that we'll still be significantly working with the law of growth.
Yeah.
You talked about this some last week with the whole thing of our consciousness being outside of time and stuff. And yes, we are in the physical world and we want to be working with the physical world. But I can't help but believe that our consciousness so the law of growth being in relation to time at least being somewhat of it's just tied to our consciousness. So if we are able to consciously work with it, then time is sort of irrelevant, even in the physical world, I think, because I think miracles, in my mind, are just the consciousness of knowing how things work better. So in that sense, like it's like in my mind, it's like a higher law, a higher quote unquote natural law, or a better understanding of the natural law. That's how I think of it, I guess. So in that context, I don't feel like we would need to be limited to the law of growth in the way that we at least see it now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean it does, and I guess I would, in some ways, I agree in that, when you put the caveat of the way we see it now, because certainly it would change. But I would ask, a simple series of questions to quote unquote make my point is, when 1,000 years, 2,000 years from now, the age of Aquarius is over, humanity has manifested, its glorified divine existence, right? We're here to stay. We're all over the universe now, and we are awesome and beautiful and gorgeous. Okay. So do you think when a tree gets planted, it's going to immediately be adult? Or is it still going to grow? Or when a child is born, or will there be birth? Does the child immediately become an adult and then get married the next day and have another kid? And does the birth, does pregnancy last for 9 months? The aspects of life that have to do with other consciousnesses, good grief, I'm having trouble with my S's today. Consciousnesses, of which trees are a consciousness. Aspects of life that have to do with other consciousnesses, I believe very much will necessitate a process that equals the quote-unquote law of growth. In that, let me explain. The universal consciousness known as God is a singular consciousness that creates with instant thought. But the moment, and in this realm, we're billions, and soon at some point it would be trillions, and who knows if there's aliens, and it's already trillions. I don't know. The point being is that humanity and divine beings keep going, and we have to work together. And we create together, and we have to work with the trees, and we have to work with animals, and so in those connections, that's where I believe growth remains a beautiful part of of the process that we will engage with, primarily because we are not one single divine consciousness. We are a multiplicity of divine consciousnesses that by all means are connected to one, and by all means can have one, quote unquote, one heart and one mind. But does that actually mean we all wake up every single day thinking the same thoughts as each other? I don't think so. And so being of one heart and one mind and all that, I think, is a different connotation. But in the end, I can't be certain by all means. But I do believe that the beauty of the fact that there's so many of us is one of the things that is a strength and will ultimately result in us maintaining relationship with, because law of growth is just one of the universal laws. And I think at least the traditions I grew up in of Christianity give this impression that at some point we'll be above all of the universal laws and we'll just be the all-powerful God. Well, there is one in a different realm, but in this realm, what if I want something different than you want? Or what if I have an assignment that's different? And anyway, that's.
So in that context, you would say, are you saying that we are choosing, as part of God's body, we are choosing to be limited in this realm?
I didn't hear that last bit. There was a bunch of noise.
I said, so in that, are you saying that essentially as part of God's body, or as God's body in this realm, we are choosing to be limited to some extent?
Limited is an interesting word for it, to be honest.
I'm saying, like, in order to function in this realm, the way that this realm functions.
In this, and then I would say, yeah. But in the same way, interestingly enough, cover your ears because it's going to be blasphemy, apparently. But in the same way, there's limitations that God has by being in the realm He's in the realm of spirit. He doesn't have physical presence without us. So that's why I say limitations is an interesting word. It could certainly be called that. But I would more readily, I guess, just refer to it as, by being in this realm, there are certain realities that I am not everywhere physically, like I'm here. Can I travel to? Yes, but I cannot be everywhere at all times. So is that a limitation or is that a reality? Semantics, I know. But I guess that's where I would go with that. And I believe that will remain. I believe being the body, being the physical presence of God is about keeping those limitations.
So that kind of makes sense. I don't know if you want to continue in this line of thought, but I have another question in this direction.
Go ahead. I mean, we're here.
What you're planning to talk on today, so sorry.
Okay. We got plenty of time.
Half an hour. Sorry. So my question, I guess, then in relation to this discussion is, if we continue with the law of growth, is sort of in the way it is now, what does that mean for the whole degeneration thing, or what's the word I'm looking for? It's like life cycle and stuff.
Right.
Like, for example, trees that are alive forever, or animals that are alive forever, or whatever. Like, they continue to grow. Does that mean we always have death? In a sense? Because that definitely doesn't feel heavenly to me.
Right.
Do things just, like, I could picture everything being alive in a different way. Having a, yeah, I don't know. I can picture a world where we have growth but not death. What do you think? I mean, but I think it would, the natural laws would be slightly different than they are now, obviously.
Right.
So I don't know what
Matt Rainey, whenever this comes up, he's like, whenever I think of the whole world, like death being gone, I just think of like us all stacking up on top of each other so much to the point where we reach to the moon as a big pile of human bodies. And I just laughed, because we can all envision it. Like, so it basically, whichever species, whether it be trees or giraffes or humans or fish or whatever, whichever species procreates the fastest will eventually take over the world, and it's just, there won't be any fish swimming in the ocean because the ocean will be fish, right? So I get the mental dilemma of like, there is no death, there is no cycle, there is no shift. And to that extent, I have a few thoughts that I clearly cannot prove, but for myself, one, humanity being divine, and putting on the glorified body, to me is a different classification than trees, animals, fish, rocks, all that stuff. To that end, the idea that animals will keep eating each other, that animals will keep, dying gruesome deaths, and the trees will keep dying, or that, I too have a hard time kind of seeing that as the solution. But I do have room for the idea that the spirit who holds those things together would get things to a point of perfect balance, right? To where the animals aren't procreating anymore, but they're not also dying, and so they're existing, they're living, they're being, and some might have issue with that in the sense that, God's nature seems to be one of expanse and shift and change and breath, kind of the ins and outs of breathing and all that stuff. And so that death would, quote unquote, be part of that. And if that is the case, then I would also then move to the second idea, which is if trees die, if animals die, if the fish die and all that stuff, then I believe that the spirit would at least make that, the death of anybody or anything can be beautiful and painless, or it can be horrendous and painful and a nightmare. So if death is part of it, I could very much see where it's, zebras aren't dying because they're being eaten alive by a lion, right? They're living a full life and then they're dying, type of thing. So I have those kind of two versions available in my mind, where either the spirit brings balance and it kind of remains, or death ceases to have a sting to it, right? And it ceases to have a victory to it. And then as far as humanity goes, we're going to be all over the universe. So as far as there being too many humans, I don't believe that's ever the case, because the universe is ever expanding. And I believe there's plenty of places for us to go, and there always will be. So that's a whole different classification that I have no problem with, the idea that humans would not die. But yeah, animals, plants, trees, all that stuff, they keep procreating at the rate they are. Eventually you run out of room. So there's definitely some questions there.
I think because we know there's no death in God and Jesus conquered it, we're going to have to redefine that word. Like in, in the latter part of the age of Aquarius into the next one, and things are so, so different. It might just be a transformation of matter into spirit. It just, whew. And, and like, water into vapor. It was, whew, just a change of molecular structure type thing. But like the Mormons believe that every little living thing is eternal and will remain eternal. Like even a blade of grass, certainly a dog, a cat, a horse, whatever. Anything that the breath of life has been breathed into, of course, that would be more of a fleshly thing, that it will live on eternally. But then they also believe a flower, leaves, trees, plants will all live eternally. And I was thinking, what we know is for this earthly realm. It's for the atmosphere of the earth as we know it. The oxygen, the carbon dioxide, and so on and so forth. So I don't know what I'm saying. It's just I wonder if it's what we know in this realm, and we live with it. Animals, plants, yada yada. It's easy. I think it's easy for us to imagine where we're going, like you say, Austin, because we're made in the image and likeness of God, unlike any other creation. But I don't know. I think a spirit is all about balance. Whatever will be is gonna balance out. But I think we're gonna have to. I guess I came on to say I think we're gonna have to redefine the word death. I think there's going to be a time when death is not the word we want to use anymore.
Well, that's, not just Hebraically, but Eastern, especially Middle Eastern thought, death was a way of living. Death was a way of life. You were creating the negative. You were creating darkness. Still creating, still alive, still living. It's perfectly evidenced when God tells Adam, in the day you eat of it you will surely die, and then he lives for another 1,000 years, or roughly 940 or something like that. So yeah, death by once again, here we are at the limitations of the English language, but by all means, death as the definition of the end of the physical fingerprint, the end of the physical vessel, whether it be of a tree or a frog or a human or a dog. That is by all means the conclusion, is that it's negative, bad juju, that thing ceased to be in its physical presence and therefore it died. Clearly there's a bunch of religions that view that as a beautiful, the cycle of life and the reincarnation and And I think there's something innately inside of humans that goes, no, like dogs aren't supposed to die. Like that cycle of life is sad, and I'm not sure if it's because we've all been so trained and raised in a world where it is. Would it look different? Would we believe different if we were raised in a world where we truly believed that my dog was going to come back again in a different form and was going to continue to be everlasting life? Possibly. Maybe we wouldn't just so automatically see it as negative. But when I just, as Christina said, it just doesn't feel right. It feels like stuff shouldn't die, shouldn't cease. So if that is, quote unquote, the actual solution, it would certainly take a significant measure of renewing the Christian world view, the Christian worldview of stuff. And obviously a lot of Eastern religions would be a lot closer to that perspective in their reverence for and appreciation of death. And I don't know, that's why I say I can't prove it. I've thought about it dozens of times, talked about it a few times. To me, it's either yes, the giving up of the physical shell is still a thing, and we just have to redefine the word. We have to, it would be peaceful, not painful, all that stuff. Or the spirit seeks balance, and at some point there's no more lions born, and there's no more giraffes born, and there's no more rubber trees that grow in the rainforest. Everything reaches balance and it stops, and they have their boundaries. That could be awesome. That also seems to have its own measure of like, yeah, but that doesn't make sense. So I don't know. It is one of the biggest evidences of the human mind condition based on what we've all been taught, that we can't actually really clearly imagine a world where these questions aren't confusing. That says a lot about just how much further we have to go to understand the fullness of what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
So, good stuff. The original question 2 weeks ago from Kaylee was, can we talk about angels? Then that week we went on discerning of spirits and kind of totally skipped over the question. And then last week we started that, and then we went into the spirit, and I wanted to kind of cap that off for a minute. And being in the spirit, that exercise we did was 100% about exercising the same muscles you would use to talk to angels or to have conversations with saints. As Julie said at the beginning of the call, instead of ascending to heaven, you just turn to it. So there's a really amazing tool known as wide angle vision. If you've never used it, if I've never explained it to you, it's very simple. You can do it right now. But it is, so I'll look forward. I'm quote unquote looking towards my screen, but everyone knows what it is to kind of be looking at something but not even caring what you're looking at, because your true attention is everywhere else instead of just the thing you're looking at. So wide angle vision is when you take your eyes, your ears, your nose, your feeling, all of your senses, you go wide angle with it to not just to the edges of your vision, but the whole room, the whole car, the whole store, the whole nature, wherever you're standing. You take your attention, and you don't get tunnel vision, you go wide angle vision. And you open up your feelers and your sensors, right, to everything around you. And for me, that is the instant tool for sensing whether there's any presence, any spiritual presence, right? I have also learned, which would be a different discussion, how to see with my physical eyes. I have not gotten like, on a scale of 1 to 10, I feel like I'm maybe at a 3 or 4, where I can see the physical realm with my waking eyes. So I do that primarily by going wide angle vision. So the best thing I can do to describe seeing that realm, if anyone's you ever been in like a vehicle on a hot day, right? And the engine's running and you're parked in like a parking lot or something. And you can see just above the hood of your car, this depending on how hot it is, you can see this band of like wavy light just above the hood of the car. That's obviously the heat coming off the hood, and the light is distorted, right? Well, that is very, very, very similar, and in some ways it's identical to the radiance that we all have and everything has, right? Which is the energy. So if you've ever, even now, if you took your hand in front of your eyes and you went wide angle vision, you could potentially, I can, if you practice, you definitely could. You could actually see that energy level just above your hand and your arm, right? Or my computer, or my, things that are living have a lot higher radiance. Well, okay, so why do I say that? Because when I see angels, or when I see quote unquote saints, or even demons on occasion, that is what I'm looking for, physically with my eyes. Now, I learned through sensing, right? So I learned to sense that there's an angel in that corner over there, or to, oh my gosh, somebody just walked in the room. Who was it? Oh, it's this person, or it's that person. So I learned by sensing, but now I'm adding the ability to see to that skill set. And I take every opportunity I can to test myself, by the way. I think I mentioned in a previous video, if you've ever been walking downtown with a friend and your friend says, oh my gosh, look at that dog. And you go, what dog? And then they go, over there. And you turn, you go, oh, that dog. Right? So we have this idea that if we go in the spirit and we don't see everything, and somebody else sees something that we didn't see, that one of us did it wrong. Right? Well, I went in the spirit and I saw, and I spoke to this person and I had this experience, and someone else goes, oh, I must have screwed up because I didn't see that. Well, you don't walk down the street and think, well, I didn't see the dog, so it must not be real. Like, we're all seeing different things. It's no different than real life. We go to the store, we see different items. We go to the restaurant, we see different people. We don't all notice the same stuff. So being in the spirit, you can very easily get into self-condemnation. Mm-hmm. Because you didn't have the same experience somebody else did. Yet, a lot of the condemnation becomes because sometimes you'll get two people who see the same thing. So when I say I test myself every chance I get, is I will, Chris and I especially, or if I'm around people who see or sense, I'll say, is there anything in this room, right? Actually, somebody asked me where we were supposed to have that event in Chicago. I went to that church. It was supposed to be an Ian Clayton event. So one of the ladies at the church said, we've had people mention, that there's angels in here. I'm curious what you see. And I said, well, there's 3 up there and there's 1 over there. And she said, that's exactly what so-and-so said. And that's exactly what this person said, which was really cool in the sense of having that confirmation to a specific question. But if you want to increase your skill and you want to increase your capacity to see those things, you have to have the fortitude of identity that does not rely on those things as pass or fail, accepted or rejected, righteous or sinner. Like, you have to realize, like, no, I have this capacity. I am righteous. I'm great. I'm an awesome person, and I'm learning how to walk. Sometimes I see the angel in the same spot that experienced person sees. Sometimes I don't. It's okay. Nobody yells at a baby for falling over, right? So those are just some pointers to seeing in the spirit. Why would you want to talk to angels? Well, good grief. Read the Bible. There's loads of that going on in there, as far as directives and Jesus being strengthened by angels and fed by angels, and Daniel having visions and getting answers to prayer from angels. The plethora of reasons to engage with the angelic realm, I believe, are fairly obvious. The saints may be a little bit different. If you want to study that, study men in white linen throughout the Bible, right? So a lot of translations just say everything's an angel. It's not true. People dressed in white linen are fairly common in Scripture, and I believe those are saints, not the angelic species. The problem is that the word angel means messenger, so they're both often referred to as angels, right? So there's some confusion there. But why would you want to speak to a saint? Actually, the same reasons as you would want to speak to an angel, and I think plus a couple more, in that saints have gone before us, right? As Paul says, we're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. So not only can you get answers to prayer or directives or stuff like that from an angel, but you can actually get wisdom from a saint. You can get a perspective from another divine being that has lived in a physical body. I can imagine so many people would be listening to this and having conniption fits because I'm not giving you a bunch of caveats, right? Well, be careful when you speak to us, and look, it is absolutely possible that you could be deceived. It is absolutely possible that you could speak to an angel or a saint, and it be your own imagination. Oh, I spoke to an angel and they said I should divorce my wife and have 5, different wives. Well, that just doesn't match up with the character of God. It doesn't match up with the Scriptures, so you don't need a genius to figure that out. The story about Dave Dewell had the angel appear to him in the elevator, and clearly something didn't go right because it ended up being a major thing to kind of destroy his life. To the fact that you could be deceived, I would also say you could deceive yourself reading the Bible. You can deceive yourself finding a good teacher. You could deceive yourself watching TV. You can deceive yourself going to school. You can deceive yourself watching the news. You get the point. If you're looking for a place with absolutely zero chance of deception, just kill yourself now and don't live, right? If you're looking for a source of 100% perfection in what it has to say, then I can't help you. That is part of the reality of if you've read my teaching on the spiral of truth, I would even suggest that that's part of the law of growth, and is actually part of some of the point, is to have the wrong answers for a while to lead you to a better answer. And so then the question is, was it really a wrong answer, or was it just a lesser answer? You believed things 5 years ago that were on the road to here. So have you finally reached the truth? Are you going to not grow anymore? 5 years from now, are you going to still be exactly the same? Probably not. So does that mean the stuff you believe now is all a bunch of lies? I don't think so. So it's the spiral of truth. It's a journey. It's the process. It's the power and the law of growth. So can you be deceived? Sure. Absolutely. Should you stay away from speaking to angels and saints and going to heaven and engaging in that realm? Absolutely not. I don't think so. So if fear is your driver and fear is the thing that constantly pops up when we have these conversations, we might get to the point where Kaylee might share with us some stuff she's been learning on tarot cards. If the phrase tarot cards just made you jump a little bit, examine that. Kimberly seems to be jumping in a positive light, but I will tell you, I'll just be open book. When Kaylee first told me that she had looked into it, I noticed in myself a little bit of a religious, ooh, tarot cards, which was funny because I'm the one that freaking brought it up, with Thomas Troward and all that. So it's there, it's stuff, it's worth examining. So that was kind of, if anyone wants to talk on it, great. But I just wanted to kind of get all that in regarding angels, saints, being in spirit, because I feel like we never fully wrapped that up and wanted to do it justice. So does anybody have any questions, comments? Concerns? Anybody concerned? If Chris was here, I would ask him if he feels safe or not. That's his new thing. You should ask him that next time you talk to Chris. Just ask him, Chris, do you feel safe? Anyway. Everyone good? Cool. So tonight, there were specific ones on that list of spiritual communication that people have texted me, asked, messaged me, whatever, in different ways. So I wanted to go over, let's see, it's good, it's only 8:10. Wanted to kind of go over a few of those, and then we'll, after tonight, we'll probably move on from this list and do something else. But specifically, signs and omens. There's been, I know Luke was very interested in learning some of that. Who here knows the difference between a sign and an omen? If you know the difference, unmute yourself.
Well, I'll take a stab at it. A sign being something that's manifest that we can see in the physical realm. We see it. And an omen is just a spiritual knowing. It's my guess.
I guess in some ways there's no wrong definition. Words are what we believe them to be, but that's not how I would define it.
Okay.
Your audio is like really weird.
Sorry, I was trying David's trick for audio. Is it working now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. the trick wasn't working. David said something that omen is, he thinks it's something to do with the future. And in my mind, just from reading, growing up, like it was more of a negative connotation usually, but I don't know if that's correct.
Like they used to think that if you saw a crow on you, I think, right, or left,
Yeah.
it was going to be good luck.
I don't know if you can hear him. He's talking about there being like a crow or something, and then it's going to be like bad luck. So, I'm sorry, but I don't know. You should get closer and talk if you.
You guys are awesome. Anyone else want to take a stab at it? So I guess with anything, these are some of those words that you could define it however you want, and there's not necessarily is Kaylee gonna go?
I guess for me, my guess would be like a sign is something you're asking for, an omen is something that you recognize, but you didn't ask for.
That's how I would define it, yes. Ding, ding, ding.
Gold star. Take that, Luke.
So I would define a sign as something you have requested, right? Like Gideon, Gideon with the fleece. And an omen is something that you've not requested, a sign that, and both of them would be physical, quote unquote, signs. And so the point of differentiating that way, if you understand the power of everything spiritual, the point is intent. One of them you intended, the other one you did not. That's why omens typically have a negative connotation. It's not because they're always negative, but because when the spirit deems it necessary enough to communicate with you in such a way that you did not intend, 9 times out of 10, it's because it's a pretty freaking important thing. And the spirit is going, slap, 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 wake up. I've been trying to talk to you for 6 months. You're about to die, right? Stop doing what you're doing. And therefore, omens have gained the reputation for being negative, because that's often when the spirit's going to override your intent and try to get you back on course without you really having thought about it. However, if your awareness after this particular teaching or similar gets to the point where you realize omens don't have to be negative, and as a matter of fact, they don't have to be slap, slap, slap across the face. Omens can be really subtle and really beautiful, right? If you're spiritually aware. So I'll give you an example. I was dealing with some stuff. We had a church 4 years ago, 4 years ago now, and there was, I won't mention names or anything, but there was just some relational challenges in the worship team that I was leading. And there was just a whole bunch of small issues with this one particular person. And on the way home from church one Sunday, I was just thinking, man, there's just all these little, none of them are big. And it's one of those things like, when there's so many small issues and you want to talk to somebody like, hey, can we talk? And then you bring up this one thing and they're like, really? Wow, you're that much of a baby, you can't deal with that? When you go, well, no, it's not that. There's like 20 of those. And none of them are really big on their own, but together it's a big freaking deal and it's really annoying. And I was thinking through that and I was like, no, I'm not being a baby. It's just really adding up. And the scripture came to mind, it's the little foxes that spoil the vine. Right? And I was like, and especially back then, I was always looking for a Bible verse to kind of confirm what I was thinking. And I'm in Kingsley. I turn left going towards the house. It's literally downtown Kingsley, which for those, I think every one of you has been there. For those who are on the recording, it's a very small town. There's one blinking light. That's it. Nonetheless, there's people, there's buildings, everything like that. And I'm driving, right after that verse comes to my mind, not 10 seconds later, I turn onto the road and there's a fox running alongside my truck for like a quarter mile, right? Broad daylight, no reason this fox should be out. I slow down like, holy moly, and it speeds up. I slow down that much. It speeds up and then runs in front of my truck across the road and then keeps running on the opposite side of the road. It's not like it went into the field. It ran parallel to the road for another quarter mile until I turned on a different road. So I wasn't asking for that. I wasn't saying, Lord, give me a sign or anything. I was meditating on some issues. I thought of that verse, it's the little foxes that spoil the vine, and 10 seconds later, I see a fox traveling with me. It was so weird. Like they're very skittish. I mean, I don't know a lot of people haven't even seen foxes. And this thing's running alongside my truck, crosses in front of me, then keeps running alongside the other side of my truck. Right? That is an omen. It was neither positive nor negative in the sense it was a confirmation. It was a quote unquote sign that I didn't ask for. Right? I've had others, and the more spiritually aware you get, the more you'll realize that they're everywhere. Omens literally are everywhere. Tom Brown, who's a good teacher that Clint Harriman loves, an amazing teacher. If you the tracker community, if you look him up, Tom Brown Jr. He actually calls it he calls it omenitis, where like everything's an omen. And the reason that omenitis is real is because omens really are everywhere. If you're paying attention to the little things, the Spirit is speaking to you easily a couple times a day with just the little things. And so if you raise your awareness to, okay, Spirit, you're getting my attention all the time, you'll find the applications are limitless. It can be about the food you're eating, the restaurant you're going to go to. It can be about a relationship thing. It can be about a professional, financial thing, health thing, entertainment stuff, just identity stuff. Some of my favorite omens are are when I'm working through something and then I see like an eagle or something. I've had some really cool ones where like a bald eagle literally zooms right over the front of my truck, no more than 5 feet above the hood of my vehicle, and then like glides right in front of me for half a mile and then takes off. Like stuff like that is really stinking cool. And if you realize, okay, I just saw that, people go, oh my gosh, that was amazing. Well, pause. What were you thinking about right before that happened? What were you meditating on right before that happened? Or just a little, maybe an hour before, maybe not right before, but what is the Spirit trying to tell you? Because amazing coincidences happen to people all the time. And I'm convinced that they're omens. I'm convinced that the Spirit is there speaking to you and guiding you and confirming you and correcting you and all of the above. Kimberly, you go ahead.
Yeah, I drove in the driveway Friday, and there was literally an owl standing in my driveway.
Yep.
It's bizarre. So you're saying that's an omen?
Absolutely.
What's that mean?
Well, you were gone when I defined the beginning of it, right? So omens not all bad. Okay, so omens are simply signs.
Well, I don't think they're bad. I just thought, I was like going, oh my God, there's an owl. I mean, an owl jumped, and then it looked at me, and it didn't leave.
Yep.
There was a freaking owl.
And so what it specifically means, you could go to dream books or some dream typology if you wanted.
Owls are smart.
Mm-hmm. That's the second question. What does an owl mean to you?
They're smart. They're wise. It was on the side of my driveway looking at me when I was driving it. It just looked at me. It stared at me driving down my driveway. I stopped and looked at it, and I went, woo, woo.
Actually, so knowing this stuff, by the way, will change your day. Like it'll change every day, right? So the next question I would ask you, if you would have called me 5 minutes later, Austin, I just saw an owl. Oh my gosh. Because you're now aware that that's an omen, I would say, what were you thinking of? Right? What were you meditating on?
On that moment? Well, that was Friday. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't expect that you would remember.
Well, now I'll call you every time because I see eagles and stuff flying. I mean, I see stuff.
Yeah.
Well, now I know when I look at. Well, I'm going to call you now.
Well, and you don't have to call me you can call me if you don't know, but a lot of times if you just consider it just for a little bit, and you tie the two together, you'll go, oh wow, that's so beautiful. That's amazing.
And then I can look at my book that you and Christopher told me to get.
Yeah, you can look in that book. There's a lot of imagery in there. I'm pulling up something. So Chris is on now, by the way. Hi, Chris.
I saw that. So I can call you and Christopher if I'm confused.
So we live this, right? So I'll just tell you, he sent me this text today. Oh, come on. You see that picture of a cloud?
Who, me?
Well, everyone. Just, I'll
I don't
see
see
it one more time. It's on I don't know why it does that.
I'll send a picture.
On my screen here. Dang it. One more. I got to talk so you guys actually see my screen. So that picture of a cloud on my phone he texted me today.
I don't see it anymore.
Anyway, it was a picture of a cloud that was in the shape of the logo, the Category 5 Ministries logo, right? He looked at the cloud, immediately took a picture of it and sent me a text and said, what have you been thinking about when it comes to Category 5? Right? So he knew it was an omen. He knew what it was about. I did not reply for my own reasons, but yes, Chris, I was thinking about stuff. So that's a perfect example of, I'm telling you, it's a really fun way to live. You know, don't turn into omenitis, right? Don't get the bug where because a waiter spills their drink on somebody else, that means God's telling you to, move to Columbus. Just saying.
Vancouver.
Yeah, right. Well, if it was Vancouver, then obviously that's God. But you get the point. Like it's you have to be level-headed about it. because you could view every little thing as, God told me. Nobody wants to be around those people. Those people are annoying as crap. But the ones that really strike you is like, that is so cool. I'm telling you. Pause for a second and consider what the Spirit is saying. So that's omens. I was saying before, a lot of times they're considered negative because when people finally get the message, it's usually an emergency. And so omens are often viewed as being negative by people because they're the only ones they listen to. But if you actually understood the beauty of them and you start paying attention to them, you'll get all sorts of little insights throughout the day. There's certain seasons where I'll get 4 or 5 a day because I'm really wrestling with something and the Spirit's going, sweet, I'll tell you, that thought you just had, here's a confirmation. That thought you just had, don't go that way, turn left. That thought you just had, here's another confirmation. That question you're asking, here's your answer. Those seasons where you're just meditating on stuff all the time, you're praying all the time. You don't realize, you don't have to go, dear God, I'm setting this aside of time. You're always in communication, and so is the Spirit. So really in those seasons, man, just pay attention to omens because they're everywhere and they can be absolutely amazing. I've had some pretty significant confirmations and revelations from omens. Signs, there's basically, so the signs are ones that you've asked for, right? So omens you don't necessarily ask for. Signs are ones you do ask for. So signs, I would say there's 3 types of signs. One type is the pre-programmed signs, such as, remember our conversation on clocks, right? So if I pre-program that 11:11 means something and 12:12 means something and 1 2 3 4 means something, then I'm essentially saying anytime, Spirit, you want to show me this sign, I have specifically requested to see 1 2 3 4 when my life is about to experience major shifts. That's me personally. Like when I see 1 2 3 4 consistently, that is a sign that I have asked for and that Spirit and I have set up communication on that for a few years now has proven to be 100% accurate. So I have pre-programmed that sign and I see it at appropriate times. It's not an omen because I've genuinely set up an intention behind it and I've genuinely set up an expectation for its timing and everything. And you can see how the difference would be very useful. A second type of sign is specific signs that you've asked for, such as Gideon with the fleece, right? Okay, Spirit, I'm so not sure about this. I need this specific sign. If I'm supposed to do this, when I walk in, I need my boss to say X, Y, Z, right? How many people have done that, right? Spirit, God, I don't know. If I'm supposed to go to Africa, when I walk in, I need my boss to say something about going to Africa, right? Like I need that kind of sign, and people get it. People crap their pants when they get it because those specific type of signs are usually pretty like, holy crap, this stuff works, But specific signs are the ones that most people like. If you were to ask most people, like, can you talk? Let's have a conversation about signs and omens. Most of them would immediately just assume that is the entire conversation. Something I've specifically asked for that God either says yes or no to. And clearly this is a much broader conversation. That is only one aspect. And then the third kind of sign is the generic signs. So have you ever said, God, show me a sign, right? I don't know what to do. Give me a sign. You haven't said a specific thing. You've just said, I'm really struggling with this. Get me something that will let me know. I don't care if it's my dog talking, or if it's my husband saying something, or if it's me stubbing my toe and I finally get the message. I don't care. Just give me a sign, please. Right? And so signs have those 3 classifications: the pre-programmed, the specific signs, or the generic signs. I feel like those have a, they don't need as much discussion as omens, in that your intent is there. So you don't need me to tell you what they mean, right? You don't need me to enlighten on what 1111 means, because in theory you've pre-programmed it, what it means for you. Kimberly, if you would have asked, God, I just need a sign that, the stuff I'm learning really is the wisdom from above, and you turn and there's an owl in your driveway, right? That would make a lot of sense. Owls are really wise, and he's going, yeah, you're good to go. So that would be a generic request for a sign that means something valuable to you. If you would have said, I need to see an owl in my driveway to know, that also would have applied, although I would argue that the specific request for signs, most of the time the Spirit's going to let you be you, right? So you ask for that specific sign, you're not going to really get it, because the Spirit's going, be you. I think it's not that it's dangerous to ask for specific signs, but to live a life of that style, I think falls short of stepping into the divinity that you are in a lot of ways. It's Gideon going, I don't believe you until you show me X. So those types of specific signs, not that they're a weakness or anything like that, but they can certainly come out of weakness. So if you're going to ask for a specific sign, make sure you're coming from a place of identity and strength. Because by all means, your Father wants you to have a give and take with him. And if you're going, I get it, Dad, but this is really, really hard. I'm willing to do it. It's Jesus in the garden. This is really difficult. If you're wanting me to do this, I need to work through this a bit. Perfect. That's a perfect opportunity to ask for a sign. So there's nothing wrong with it per se, but it could be overused by all means. So that's signs and omens. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts or shares? Cool. If we keep going at this pace, we might be able to get to tarot cards. Kaylee, get ready. The last one on my list was feeling, right? So there's people that have asked about feeling, and there's two ways to apply that word, which is I almost delineated them on the list, but I figured, well, when we get there, we can just talk about both. So obviously, there's two types of feeling. There's emotional feeling and physical feeling. So the one of the really cool ones that you're all familiar with when it comes to, remember, this is a list of spiritual communications. Okay. So one way that we've all experienced spiritual communication through physical feeling is when you meet somebody and you get sick to your stomach, right? You get the icky, stay away from me, I don't know why I don't like you, but I don't want to know you very well feeling, right? And it's always interesting when people are like, oh, that's the greatest person in the world, how do you not like them? And you're like, I don't know, I just can't figure it out. Those were ones I'm always like, I wonder why I felt that way. Other ones, when you shake that guy's hand and somebody else comes up and he's a womanizer, or he murders people or whatever, like whatever, and you're like, oh, I knew something was off. That dude's he's a Republican. I'm just kidding. I had to throw that in there. So obviously the physical reaction that your body is giving you to meeting somebody who gives you the willies, the heebie-jeebies, is a spiritual form of communication. But another one you may not be familiar with, and one some of you may actually need, you might look back on your life and go, I wonder if this was that, is you can have localized sensations such as pain, right? So one of my favorite stories, Clint Harriman was preaching, and in the middle of his message, one of his molars back here started like it hindered him from moving his mouth. It started hurting so badly. And it got his attention so much that he stopped. He's like, okay, I've got to stop for a second. Is there someone in the room who's got a tooth issue in the lower right jaw? And 3 people raised their hand. And he was like, okay, well, you're healed, right? And the pain went away. Sure enough, these people, I had abscessed tooth or whatever, blah, 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 blah. He's had another time where he was preaching and all of a sudden his ear started ringing. He couldn't even hear himself. And he goes, time out. Is somebody in here got problems in the right ear? And then like 2 or 3 people raise their hand. If you listen to a lot of healing evangelists, they'll tell you stories where their knees started to hurt or their back started to hurt. And when they pay attention to it, they'll realize it's actually a prophetic insight towards somebody else's healing. It's a really cool one that is a bit weird if you don't realize what's going on, because you'll literally have this pain that you shouldn't be having. And if you've ever experienced that, consider next time it happens, if it happens again, that maybe that pain isn't for you. Maybe it's for somebody you're with. And the spirits and the quantum entanglement is attracting that healing from you. There's another really interesting one when it comes to physical that is a bit interesting, but I've talked to quite a few people who, it's one of those ones, the physical feeling, that I've actually had more people come up to me and go, hey, Austin, is this weird? Or what do you think this is? And that is the feeling of lust. That if you've ever been around certain people that carry a spirit, you can feel that rush of like physical lust without it being anywhere on your mind, right? And when you don't have the mindset to mix with the feeling, it is very noticeable. If you've ever been in a church scenario or in a public scenario, especially if you've got kids, I'm almost guaranteeing you that parents feel this. It's because it's a warning. It's, hey, the dude behind you in line is a pedophile. Watch your kids, right? You're not thinking of it at all, and the spirit's giving you that feeling of lust without the thoughts of lust. And it's like such a mismatch of thought and emotion that I've had 4 or 5 people over the course of my ministry come up to me and pull me aside at church and be like, okay, I'm wigging out right now. Like, I feel this really strong sense of lust, yet I'm thinking about the wafers for communion. Like, I'm not even there. And because it's such a disconnect, it's actually really, really obvious. So those are just some examples on how physical feeling can be spiritual communication. Then there's the emotional feeling. So have on my list to actually do an exercise. Kaylee, can you unmute yourself for a second?
Yes, sir.
Can you give us like a 5-10 minute introduction to tarot cards?
I hope so.
Okay. Because I think there's a few people that are interested in it. I mean, I can give you the feeling exercise, and if we want to hang up, we can always do it after we hang up. But why don't I'll pause there for a second as far as the emotional side of feeling, and we'll get into this for a bit. Let me set it up for a second, Kaylee. So tarot cards obviously have a bad rap, especially amongst the Christian community, or pretty much not all religious communities. Actually, tarot cards are a very religious reality in other countries. But the power behind them is twofold. One is you do have centuries of intent and energy put into that practice. And for those who might be a little bit nervous about the idea, just consider that the Bible is full of similar practices, such as casting lots, the Urim and the Thummim, the there's one other example. Basically, the idea that the scarlet thread, the Aaron's rod. There's the general idea that inanimate objects can be used to reveal a spiritual message, right? The tarot cards are an interesting part of that, in that they're a full set of concepts that, for those, it's like dream interpretation. For those who are practiced, you can actually interpret different spiritual messages and concepts. Now, I will admit there is a part of me that still, I want to study it. Kaylee's letting me borrow her book here, Tarot Made Easy, because there is a reality to some of the ways it's been abused in the past. But as I said about anything else, I mean, if you want a world full of deception, just go ahead and die now, because it's everywhere, and you can get, that's not the point of living. But there's more I'm sure I'll have to say about it in the future, but that's kind of a general introduction that I'll then turn over to Kaylee.
I just started this a couple weeks ago. I'm not sure of the exact date. Actually, Aunt Kiki might know, because I was telling her when I just started to get into it. But Austin mentioned this, I want to say at least 3 weeks ago, if not longer, as one of something that people use, and it just hit me hard. And I kept feeling it for about 4 or 5 days, and then I ordered some cards online randomly one night. Slightly sleep deprived, and it was one of the best decisions I've done so far. I'm really enjoying it, but I actually grabbed my deck here a second. I have a couple, but there is 78 cards, and they're split up into several different, suits. But the main thing is there's a major arcana, if I'm saying that right, and a minor. I think there was 24 something, 26 in the major. And those are going to be the ones that you see in movies all the time, like Death, a Magician, the Empress, or the Emperor, and all those. And those are trump cards. Those are the when they come up, you pay attention to them. Each of them mean a different thing. In fact, I know I've texted Austin pictures of cards, and I'm like, hey, this one kind of reminds me of you, and this one reminds me of me. But they each have their description, and then I actually went and got my cards read before when I was buying them. I have 2 decks actually in town, and she did a general one first, and then she did ones where I could ask questions. And I didn't ask them aloud. I would shuffle the cards and just put my intent into it. And so much about tarot cards is just having your intent. And so I had some really fun readings, and she actually at one point was flipping down the cards in my general, and she looked at me and she's like, are you married? And granted, at this time I wasn't wearing my wedding ring. It's being resized right now. And I was like, yeah. She's like, these cards mean you're in a healthy, equal relationship. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. But since then, the more I look into it, the more I studied it, it's been a lot of fun. Luke let me practice on him on Thursday. He let me do a tarot card reading for him. Maybe he'll share some things with us if you want. But some of the things with tarot cards is, if your card flips upside down, there's multiple ways they say to read it. The most common one is it's the opposite of what the card is. I haven't found that true for myself or when I've been practicing with Ron or with Luke. The 2 standard ones I find most common with us are it's either something subconscious that you don't actually realize is going on, but is there and it's to be made aware of it, And the other one is that you're doing it, but you're not getting the results that you want. Like one of them, it was like being patient and trusting and different stuff. And I'm like, that's all I have been. And it wasn't until we realized this, I'm like, I have been doing that and getting the exact opposite results that I've been wishing for. That was a great card and a great thing, but it wasn't giving me the results I needed. And there's the last one that it is, some cards are, you look at it and the picture is male or female, or, you know, Queen of Pentacles versus like a King of Pentacles, and they each mean something and can represent people in your life. So sometimes when it's upside down, it might be the Queen of Pentacles, but that role is actually played by a male in your life. So it's representing a male in your life that has the same characteristics as the card. And then as you go into the cards, they're really fun. Like, you know, all fives have, you know, this, like all tens are a sign of completion, of coming to an end, and stuff like that. And so once you get to know, like, the language and just the hints of which of each of like the suits mean, like cups is a very passionate cup, usually with emotions, and love is the emotion one. So if you know, look it up with a number, you can usually guess. And Ron and I actually sometimes play games where we try to guess based on the number and the suit of what it can mean. Sometimes it's spot on, sometimes it's really off. But yeah, does anyone have any questions? That'd be, I guess, easier. I know how you feel, Austin.
I just usually get about 5-10 seconds and then I move on.
Okay. I'm not really sure where to go. The only other thing is there's multiple readings and there's multiple cards that you use for different readings. So it's just, honestly, it's the language and cards. So it's really fun. And a lot of times you see a picture and like death, there's a skull on it, and it's, you know, kind of dark, but then you actually read it and it's about like closing of a chapter. It's about the death of one thing, but a beginning of something new. And it's about growing, and it's really fun when you get to learn what these mean and how they relate. Luke, you unmuted?
Yeah. Could I say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Luke.
Yeah.
So when she did my reading, like, it was totally right on. I mean, I'm going through a lot of big changes right now, and I'm like moving works and stuff like that, and you know, I got death, and death is what is it? New beginnings, you know, old things are passing away, stuff like that. And then what I got was it the Queen of Pentacles, and oh, I wish could you pull up some of the ones that, yeah.
Yeah, give me a second. I can pull it up here.
Yes, so these tarot cards, I felt like I was okay with them, just because the way that my dreams worked, when God talked to me, they were kind of the same way. They used symbolism, and like clouds meant one thing, and then thunder meant another. So the tarot cards are kind of like along the same lines, but you know, I just felt like they were easy for me to connect with because I'm used to that kind of symbology anyway. And all it takes is just intention behind it. So that's what Austin said.
And to me, I would throw one caveat into this whole thing, and that is dreams and all that stuff. It's you and spirit, right? There's
Right.
two parties to the thing. Stuff like this, there's now a third party, right? There's somebody engaging, and to that end, by all means, if there's a third party, that has an agenda, if there's a third party that has, it's no different than we do psyche and we do balances on behalf of other people. You ask, is it safe and appropriate? Because I can go in with an agenda to fix Luke, right? And it's my agenda. And I might think it's amazing, but it's not the Spirit's agenda for Luke. So I would say with tarot, and anything that includes a third party, whether it's psyche or tarot or interceding on behalf of Israel, like the agenda of that third party is absolutely part of the energy in the process. And I think if the church asked for permission to pray for Israel before just assuming that they can, I think a lot of times they'd get the answer no. That would be definitely a caveat that for those who are nervous of the idea is, Kaylee in this case is third party for Luke. And Kaylee's got beliefs. Kaylee's got quote unquote things behind what she's dealing with. And so as that third party or the person receiving the intercession, if you will, just being aware of that dynamic. And, I think it'd be pretty beautiful if you had a group of people that so believed in the power of their prayer that they sought permission before they prayed anything. Right. And Kaylee and I haven't talked about this. I'm just thinking of it out loud. Like this is actually, there's this third party dynamic that I think is actually an interesting, it's not the only place you find this dynamic. Like I said, psyche, intercession of any sort, but it's something worth meditating on for sure.
It's definitely real what he's saying. The one thing that I like is that you always have the person who wants the tarot card reading to shuffle the cards, and then you pull it up and read it. So definitely I could put my intention there, and I'm working on that. And it's the same thing again, like you said with psyche. And also a lot of it is gonna be who's reading the cards, because you can do on translation and what you accept and whatnot. But it is a fun way, and it's a great practice. And I don't know. I guess if you have any other questions or you want to know more, just Marco Polo me or whatnot. Thank you for letting me share, Austin.
Thank you for sharing. So, and that's a perfect amount of time, because I going back to, so this will in theory cap off our list of spiritual communication. Not that we've covered everything, but the others, there's a lot of principles that we've already discovered that, if you've got additional questions, we can always cover them specifically. But the emotional side of feeling, when it comes to spiritual communication, is, I would say, probably the most watered down, abused, and misunderstood of all the spiritual communication types, because we live in a world, well, I feel like, and I feel like, and I feel like, and it's not really spiritual for a lot of people, right? If you were to ask people if their emotions are spiritual, they'd be like, no, they're emotional, right? It's so much tied to how we operate as humans that it's lost its place as being a spiritual form of communication, right? So the obvious reality is that if your emotions are not what you wish they were, that's probably, if you're upset and you wish you weren't upset, if you were offended and you wish you weren't offended, if you're sad and you wish you weren't sad, if and you don't know why, then by all means look into it. I'm not saying anything that you don't know. I'm just trying to draw out that your emotions truly, truly are a spiritual form of communication. And I know a lot of denominations would completely chuck me out the front door for saying that, because, oh, the heart is deceiving, exceptionally wicked and deceitful and da 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 da. That's a great Old Testament concept. It's a good thing we were given a new heart, right? It's a good thing we were given a new mind. It's a good thing we were given a new spirit, right? So any of this, man sucks, we're broken, and don't trust it, that's Old Covenant. Congratulations. Welcome to the New Covenant. Welcome to the New Age. You're awesome. You're divine. And you can go ahead and believe that your heart is not a piece of crap. Okay. It's been circumcised. It's no longer a heart of stone. It is now a heart of flesh. Move on. Okay. With that said, emotions are not this weird third-party thing over here, right? You have a body, soul, and a spirit. You don't have body, soul, spirit, and emotions, right? So emotions have to belong somewhere, right? And they're unseen. So clearly, there's some form of unseen communication going on inside of you. And I believe it is very much your soul receiving communication. You're just like your body can receive communication in the form of getting sick, when you meet, the stuff earlier, you meet the creepy guy, or the spirit of lust or whatever, like your body can feel those things in the same way your soul feels emotions. And some of them are very obvious. If somebody dies and your heart hurts and you're really sad, clearly your soul is grieving, but really pay attention to the ones that don't make sense, right? To the ones where you're just irritable, or you're just what. Those times, pay attention. Ask questions. Why am I so irritable today? Why am I so short? Why am I? And then on the reverse side, not just like notice what your emotions are, but realize that you can actually use those emotions to communicate the other way, right? So emotions are energy. So have you guys ever seen the movie The Secret? And there's a few books out there. Then the idea is feeling is the secret, right? If you haven't heard that, feeling is the secret, because your emotions come from the heart, and your heart is literally a frequency generating machine. And quantum physically, everything is frequency. So you literally can use your emotions not only to receive communication, but that's actually the most powerful way to give communication spiritually. And so there's an exercise I want you to do, and I'm going to tell you how to do it, and then we'll end the call. That's probably the easiest way to do it. We're at the end of the call, and I think it's a really appropriate way to kind of sign off for the night. But here's the point is that emotions or feeling, I feel so-and-so, you can obviously receive. And if you've got ones that don't make sense, that's when you really pay attention. But if you want to create reality in your life, use the same mechanism to create and communicate the other way to the unseen realm what it is you do want. So if you want wealth, or you want prosperity, you want love, you want health, whatever, this is a big statement, but basically you put yourself in the feeling of having it, and then you create that, and you keep vibrating at that level where your emotions are actually creating your reality. Right? So emotions are not a throwaway. In many ways, they're the most powerful part of who you are. Okay? Your imagination is stop number 1, and your emotions in many ways are stop number 2, and then stop number 3 is physical manifestation. Right? So your emotions are massively powerful. In an attempt to actually give you guys an exercise that can show you the difference, or show you the power of emotion. We've grown up in a world, especially Christian world, where prayer has to involve words, right? Okay, let's pray. And words, 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 some more words, amen, right? And I think we've all probably heard thousands of them that were actually preachers finishing their sermon out loud for the congregation to hear, instead of actually engaging in spiritual communication to quote unquote Father or Holy Spirit or Jesus, right? The 20-minute prayer that you might as well have just said with your eyes open and reiterated your whole sermon again to the crowd, because I don't think God needed to hear it, but for whatever reason you decided to pray it again, right? So, sorry, a little vent there. I feel like everyone understands me. But anyway. I have Ron and Kaylee on my screen, and their both heads just went, yes. Right in unison. It was perfect. Anyway. So, we've heard prayer with words, and we've seen how powerless it can be. I think we've all, actually, I'm certain everyone has also prayed prayers without words. Right? You may not have realized you were praying, but you sure as hell were praying. Okay. So, you guys can identify it, but have you ever actually prayed the same prayer once with words and once without words? That's your exercise. So pick something that is real in your life, not, thank you, Lord, for this food. Although, honestly, thank you, Lord, for this food would work. But pick something that means something to you, something you would actually pray about. And pray about it using words. The real exercise actually would tell you to take a walk, right? Go on a little walkabout and talk using words, right? And pray about whatever. Something that means something to you. And then kind of sit down, stop, examine that. And then go on another walk and pray the same prayer without any words. Right? The goal of it is to show you the power of the emotion. Because if you're actually intending prayer without the words, you're forcing your emotions to pray for you, right? It's a really cool way to kind of make sure your emotions are involved and it's not just your head. Now, for those who might be asking, can you pray with words and emotions at the same time? Of course. We've all seen that as well. We've all seen very powerful prayers that have words as well as the emotion to go behind it. But this is a cool exercise to show you the difference between the two and to show you the real power behind the emotions and the creative capacity. So if you're doing belief statement balances and you're envisioning prosperity and all that stuff, and you're using lots of words and lots of techniques and everything like that, and you've not engaged your emotions, this is a great opportunity to do that. This is a great insight to it. So I'll leave that as your exercise. You call it homework if you will. But obviously there's no grades. So if you don't do it, we'll get kicked off the call next week, but that's fine. And with that, I think it's a great place to end. If anybody has any parting words, feel free to share.
I just have a question. I'm working with this every single day as much as I possibly can. And when you say, yeah, I definitely know the difference between praying with words and then praying with emotion. And, they can all be all together. But what I'm learning to do is visualize as if it's I'm seeing what I want and I have it now, whether I have it now or not. Well, if I wanted it, that I would have it. But I mean, so, and I can get so excited with the vision, and it's happening, but yet it isn't in real time and space. So you didn't mention visualization.
Correct.
Wouldn't that be the factor that would bring the emotion?
It could be. I didn't mention it not because it can't work, but because it's about isolating the emotion muscle. Right.
Hmm.
You know, there's a much broader way to say, here's some prayer advice. But I just, this exercise is designed to specifically highlight, you have a muscle called emotion that, because if I said, you know, in visualization, it's there, but if you think that you have to visualize in order to emote, that's not true. I don't believe it is. I think it's often accompanied with, a lot of times you can't help but visualize. You can't help but visualize the imaginary argument you're going to have when you get home, right? And you're getting pissed off just thinking about what he's going to say, and then oh my God, I'm going to respond when he says that, you know. And so we do that naturally, but it's also a perfect example of, you don't need to add visualization to let the emotion do its thing. So if you want to, by all means you can. There's no rule. But I would not say it's a requirement, especially since a lot of people have a hard time visualizing. Right?
Okay.
A lot of people, you know, I don't know, I can't visualize, so apparently I can't create. No, you can emote. I can promise you that, because I've seen you get pissed off. You know, so, and that is creative. So, yeah, all thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Cool.